Not really. So a lot of chief information security officer listening to this will be like, hey, you just scared me. There's so many threat vectors now. And you guys compounded it in your 20-minute discussion on and on and on, right? So that means an incident may and will happen,
Yeah,
right?
of course. It's the simple opportunity, right? We can develop technology, we can procure technology, we can innovate existing technology and evolve it and so forth, right? But people are not machines. We can't program a person. We can't submit a bug request to fix some kind of tension or deficiency in a person, right? The human element becomes in some ways the most predictable element and the most unpredictable element.
Welcome to CXO Spotlight, powered by Flywheelr. I'm your host, Chirag, and today we are diving into rapidly evolving world of SaaS security. Our guest is Alfredo Hickman, Chief Information Security Officer of Obsidian Security, who's bringing his experience as U.S. Marine Corps veteran and front lines of cybersecurity, protecting organization against increasingly sophisticated AI-driven threats today. Alfredo has built an impressive career spanning 17 years in information security, with leadership roles at Rackspace and as a founder of SystemSec before joining Obsidian. Welcome, Alfredo. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chirag. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for spending some time with us.
Awesome. Let's dig into it. So, before we dive deep into the topic of security and SaaS security, tell us about your role at Obsidian Security and what makes the company so uniquely positioned in today's cybersecurity landscape.
So my role at Obsidian is really focused on protecting the organization and by extension our customers, and then helping to share the vision, share the story of comprehensive SaaS security with the market and with our customers and such. So what makes Obsidian so uniquely positioned to be able to be authentic in this space, to be able to share the story and to be able to deliver the value and the outcome that our customers expect is really the experience and the history and the capability set that Obsidian brings to bear. So prior to Obsidian, there was no pure play SaaS security vendor. Obsidian really helped to create and establish the SaaS security market. And then we were joined very rapidly by a whole host of competitors as well as very established organizations that decided to get into this space. But our DNA coming out of organizations like, if you look at the leadership team, if you look at the folks of us that helped to either establish or to build Obsidian from the very earliest days, we were the founders and co-founders of Carbon Black, of Cylance, people coming out of the US Defense Department and intelligence community involved in the most sophisticated cyber defense and offensive operations on the planet, right? So we brought that DNA looking to disrupt, to really create the SaaS security space and bring that history, rich expertise of these capabilities and histories to bear on this new problem set. You mentioned a little bit that I've been doing security for a little over 17 years, and information security and national security prior to that. But when I was at the previous organization leading security product engineering at Rackspace, we had created OpenStack. We had partnered with AWS, with Azure and GCP. We were very intimate and familiar with deploying, technologies and cloud infrastructures at global scale and then delivering managed services, in my case, managed security services. When we saw our customers and our organizations moving, digital transformation journeys from their on-prem data centers into consuming cloud services from the large public cloud service providers, these technologies were different technologies. These environments were unique. The capabilities were unique, but a lot of the fundamentals and capacities existed for us to be able to secure these environments and provide these security outcomes for our customers. As our customers moved from on-prem into public cloud and then started consuming SaaS applications, cloud applications, public cloud applications, they lost the ability to be able to secure these assets, to be able to more effectively govern these assets, and a whole slew of new threats and methods evolved to compromise those resources. Many different reasons for this. If you look at public cloud, there's only a handful of these hyperscale public cloud providers. Secondly, there's a very clear shared security responsibility model where we understand that the cloud security providers are responsible for these assets or these perspectives of security, and we as the consumers are responsible for the other sets of responsibilities of security. But when you move up to the SaaS application tier, there's thousands of providers globally. There is no common shared security responsibility model. You cannot use, traditional security tooling to secure these assets. And oftentimes you have the administration and proliferation of these applications exist outside of the central IT and security organizations. So at Obsidian, we saw that as a ripe opportunity, a blue ocean opportunity to go and create this market space and then really have become the leader in this space. It's been a fantastic journey, Shra.
Yeah, and I did some research on this, and there is very, very clear data. I mean, I've been in tech world and I've seen legacy to cloud and then platform as a service, and now it's all about SaaS, software as a service, right? Just the barrage of it. In fact, the data that really made and solidified this for me as SaaS security as a strategic play was that over 60% of ransomware attacks are now originating from SaaS platforms. So, what's the single biggest SaaS security blind spot you are seeing in most enterprises, and how do you actually close it?
Yeah. So over 60% of these ransomware attacks attributed to SaaS resources and 95% of the breaches in SaaS as a result to the compromise of human and non-human identities. One of the real joys at Obsidian has been able to have this front row first person view into hundreds of incident response engagements globally across every single vertical you can imagine with customers of every single demographic, right? And what we've seen, the common denominator is the compromise of the human and non-human identities that then are allowing threat actors to compromise all of the federated applications so that that identity has access to. There's many different reasons for this. Part of this is the fact, as we talked about before, that there is no shared security responsibility model. People make assumptions that when they go into and purchase, a subscription for a SaaS application or such, that provider is taking care of all of their security issues for them, which is clearly not the case. And then when you federate, which is a good practice to have the identity provider to federate the identities, but what happens is when those identities are exploited, is now you have a federated mesh of access where these threat actors can compromise an identity and pivot horizontally across all of the integrated applications, SaaS, on-prem, and in cloud infrastructures, right? Wherever that identity may have access to. So it provides a very complex set of challenges that lead into these ransomware attacks, these business email compromise attacks, leading to financial exploitation and so forth.
So, if I'm a chief information security officer, you have my attention. Like
Mhm.
you, I mean, I'm scared, and I know that I need to do this. So, you showed me the blind spot. How do you cover this blind spot?
Yeah. There's fundamentals apply, even though that SaaS is a unique operating domain. And I use this term operating domain. It's an analog from the military, right? Where you think, sea, land, air, space, these are just operating domains analogous to corporate endpoint fleets, data centers, network tier, cloud infrastructure tier, PaaS, SaaS. SaaS is just another operating domain. The fundamentals still apply. People, process, technology. I come from a pretty heavy security operations background. At Obsidian, we started with a very heavy kind of security operations background, right? Very threat centric. If you would have asked me this question 10 years ago, I probably would have given you a different response. But now, to answer your question most directly, I am a huge believer in purpose built technology that is designed to secure these resources in that plane. And regardless of technology, governance. Governance ends up becoming a huge, I actually call governance shift left in the context of SaaS security. So our audience, we're all familiar with the concept of shift left. The earlier in the life cycle of some issue that you can resolve,
Yeah.
that you can get upstream of the issue, the least disruptive, the less expensive, the less stressful it is to resolve an issue. In SaaS, you do not have direct insight into the composition, the dependencies, so forth and so on of these applications. You can do and should do effective due diligence and look at the SOC 2 reports and the architecture diagrams and so forth, but realize SaaS applications are highly dynamic. They change from day to day, week to week, month to month, right? So you can no longer take these point in time snapshots and then have reasonable assurance in the security. You have to get into the governance, from the very beginning. Procurement. One common thing that all of these corporate SaaS applications have in common is that someone must pay for them. So if you can hook in to the procurement phase and insert appropriate tooling, appropriate due diligence reviews, the vendor, third party relationships, and so forth, the more secure that your SaaS journey will become downstream as you get into implementation and operations.
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna take a step back, and as you spoke about military, it reminded me. I want to talk more about you a little bit, right? Because
Sure.
what drew me to you and to reach out to you and have this is this amazing consistency in what you have been doing for all your career and still having so much versatility. So you were in Marine Corps, infantry, counterintelligence, right? And then now you're in cybersecurity. You almost have played this protector role all throughout your career. And I just love the fact about that, even though it's very different worlds, extremely different worlds, but still your role was to look out for threats, threat detection, and then addressing that, right? So how did your experience as Marine Corps infantry veteran shape your approach to cybersecurity leadership?
I would take it even a step further. I mean, it's I think this is one of the things in our industry, in the security industry, what we have, discovered over the last decades is that there is no common path to this industry. The common path is the uncommon path. It's a multidisciplinary industry, people of all different types of backgrounds and so forth, right? But one thing that a lot of people share in common in this industry is the desire to protect, the desire to serve, the desire to make things better. I think that's a commonality even outside of the cybersecurity space and the technology space in general, to make things better. I am a first generation American. Both of my parents were immigrants in the United States. I grew up, I had a pretty rough childhood, and that need to be a defender, the need to protect my family, my friends, my community, was something that just was instilled to me from the very earliest, days of my childhood, right? Just by virtue of being an immigrant or a child of immigrants in a new country and kind of going down this path. Now, I was fortunate that being a child of the 80s, growing up in the 90s, the internet was really starting to take off. The
Yeah.
commercialization of the internet was really starting to take off. So the streaming music, the online video games, the bulletin board systems, the movies, like all of this was starting to happen when I was a child, right? One of the things that set me apart from a lot of my friends was that as much as I loved all of those things, I loved the music and the games and this and that, but I love to understand how these technologies worked, how they come together, what the implications of these technologies were for society, for industry, and so forth. And that also gave me an opportunity to escape the realities of my where I was growing up. I would spend my summers, during summer break from school in the public libraries because it was safe and there was air conditioning. And I would read stacks and stacks of all of the books on programming and computer building and video game design and everything else. And that's what I thought. I was like, wow, this is my ticket out of this environment. This is how a very similar story that you can see for a lot of people in our industry. This was our ticket out.
Yeah.
And when I was in high school, the school started to offer classes on, C++ and web development and so forth and so on. And I took all those courses. And I thought that I was going to go to university and this is what I was going to do. And then on a sunny Tuesday afternoon or morning in September 11th, 2001, we had the attacks in New York City, the Pentagon in Pennsylvania, where we knew that the United States was at war, right? And in my family, it was two boys, and like everybody else, we were shocked. We were glued to the news, and we realized that things had changed and that our nation was at war. And me and my brother, we knew that we needed to be a part of that and to do our part as quickly as possible. So I, as quickly as possible, graduated from high school. The Marine Corps would not take you, with a GED. You had to have at least a high school diploma. So I went to all the night school. I went to all the summer school and graduated as quickly as I could. And I enlisted in the Marine Corps infantry. I took my examinations. I did very well in my examinations. Cyber was really not an MOS, a specialty in the conventional military as it is now. At the
Mhm.
time, it was very select, units. But I said, look, I want to go fight. And if you told the Marine Corps at the time, the 2003, that you wanted to go fight, boom, they were going to send you to the front line. So that took me into this world of national security, counterterrorism, counterinsurgency, and really expanded my experience, my exposure to national security. Right? Fortunately, I was able to use that opportunity to transition back into tech. So what was happening at the time was there was a root cause analysis. There was an investigation into the failures in the intelligence and defense apparatuses
Yes.
that resulted in September 11th.
Yep.
One of the conclusions was that there was a lot of inefficiency, a lot of competition amongst the intelligence organizations that resulted in inefficiencies in taking those intelligence products and putting them into the hands of our fighting forces, right? Special
Mhm.
operations and so forth and so on. It was called
Mhm.
fusion.
Mhm.
I was exposed to some of the fusion work while I was deployed overseas that basically took the signals and cyber intelligence components and put it into the hands of people like myself. So I
Mhm.
volunteered. I raised my hand. I said, hey, it was like in the movies. They come around asking, hey, does anyone have any experience with computers? Is anyone technically inclined? I raised my hand. I said, yes, I want to go. This is so cool. I want to go learn this. So they picked me to go to these courses, and I got that exposure to big cyber in the national security context, which then resulted in opportunities to move into the private sector civilian world after I was done with my military service.
Yeah, I'm blown away. I think I have two things to say
Yeah.
before we move forward. One is thank you for your service. Really appreciate it. I think a lot of us can have this amazing conversations here in a safe environment because a lot of sacrifices that leaders like yourself have made. So thank you for your
Thank you.
service.
Yep.
And the second thing is thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing such a personal story. And I did not know such insider track of what happened with 9/11 and the security apparatus. We all have seen documentaries, but there is so much depth to it. It's fascinating that you were exposed to it at that time. But so that was your personal journey. I want to move on a little bit to Obsidian. You've been
Sure.
instrumental in Obsidian's rapid growth. What's been the most counterintuitive lessons you have learned about scaling security innovation in today's threat landscape?
Yeah, there so much. I've learned so much over the course of the last almost 7 years at Obsidian. When I joined Obsidian, there was only a handful of us, and we had this bold vision to go create this new market and establish, the SaaS security as an actual space in the industry. The threats and the challenges have evolved so much, right? And we've learned so much. So if I think about some of the big learning points that have come over this journey, is that yes, and we talked about this a little bit before, yes, SaaS is a new domain of operation, but the fundamentals still are so important. The ability to inventory your assets, the ability to understand who has access to these environments, integrations. This is something that I learned here at Obsidian that I share with the community all the time. These SaaS applications, they're not just discrete applications. They're platforms, many of them, the Salesforces and the ServiceNows and the Google Workspaces and so forth. Some of these
Yeah,
are
I know.
platforms with rich integration capabilities, with rich marketplaces, with dozens or hundreds in some instances of third-party integrations. All of these integrations are discrete vendors, with their own, data flows and permissions and exposures and so forth. So when you think about SaaS, similar to when you think about security in the cloud, you no longer have these resources that reside within your perimeter that are relatively static, right? Where you understand the composition, you understand the architecture, you understand the data flows. In SaaS, you click a button, API integration, OAuth application grant. Now your architecture has changed because you have a new third party vendor relationship with data flows and exposures and so forth and so on, right? So that becomes huge. Regulatory requirements. This is another thing that a lot of people don't really think about. You have your SaaS applications deployed and you think you understand where those vendors exist geographically so that they, correspond to your data localization and your regulatory requirements. But you integrate these applications with other integrations, and oftentimes you have no idea where that data is flowing outside of all kinds of legal jurisdictions.
Yeah, wow, that is so true. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So these are some of the big things that I share with our customers, right? Governance becomes super huge. Getting plugged in with the procurement teams, with the finance teams, that becomes super huge, right? Another thing, security. Security, if we diffuse capability by building up capacity organically across your organization, you still have the mothership of security and governance organizations. But SaaS oftentimes is procured, deployed, and operated at the business unit level, where you have the biz ops, the fin ops, the BI, the all of these different subject matter experts within their own business units that have their own line of business applications that they know and that they operate, that no longer live inside of central IT or security. Maybe you federate through the IDP and you have some concept of federated identities to bring some sort of access governance, but the actual administration and configuration exists outside of central IT and security organizations. Security cannot be everywhere at all times. That's where
Yeah.
that governance umbrella allows you to scale, you know?
Yeah. This almost reminded me of this book I read. I don't know if you've read by Nicholas Carr, The Story of It and IT. And it really talks about explaining the concept of cloud in a very simple way that earlier, a lot of textile companies in America used to have a coal plant that used to generate electricity, right? And then one fine day, Commonwealth Edison Comet introduced a plug and a switch through which the electricity will come, and the whole thing got commoditized. And that's what cloud did. It is still a data center, but it's hosting and exposing that to so many edges, so many organizations. And a very accentuated format of that is SaaS.
Mhm.
Now the whole platform is commoditized with the marketplaces and the integration points with so many other people.
Yes.
This commoditization is also bringing the exposure radius being so big now, right? If I can take that one step further, now next question is that now we live in AI world. So what's your approach to keeping up with this AI driven threats and sort of automation in the SaaS security?
Yeah, absolutely. The analogy of the commoditization of energy is you went from a hub and spoke architecture to a many to many architecture, right? Where you commoditize these resources. SaaS is very analogous to that, right? It's no longer a simple point to point or hub and spoke. It's really, especially in multi-tenant environments, it is many to many. There's even analogies there to like agentic artificial intelligence and systems being able to communicate amongst themselves with little to no human interaction, right? Proliferation of AI technologies now everywhere. When I look at AI from the lens of a chief information security officer, especially at a technology company where we're producing a product, I look at it through a few different lenses. I'm looking at it through the lens of the consumer of technology that is looking to procure technology to enable my organization to be more efficient and effective. That's a positive risk, an opportunity risk that I, as a CISO, help my organization become more efficient and effective. I think a lot of security leaders tend to look at risk, through this very myopic lens of everything negative, right? Negative, how Department of No, Department of Obstruction, and so forth and so on. What I see now as a trend in contemporary security leaders is we understand that we have a unique perspective in our organization as being technology native, business enabling function where we understand risk and opportunity very well. So if we can convert not just, negative risk in a risk register, but opportunity risk, where are we underexposed to technologies that can allow our organizations to be more effective, more, in the market, more efficient from a productivity perspective? We can actually deliver more value to the organization. AI is one of those components. So I look at it through a lens of procuring technology for the organization. How are we reasonably developing AI capabilities in our product? because
Hmm.
we become a data sub processor for our customers. So how are we doing this responsibly? Because at Obsidian, we've been developing ML and AI since before it was cool, right? It's almost like 18 all over again. But so we've been doing this for a while. So how are we doing this responsibly? Looking at things like ISO 4201 for international based standards, policy, process, technology controls, so that we can enable people to develop these AI capabilities securely and responsibly.
Hmm.
And then also as a data sub processor to us as well, because not only is AI being fielded via new technology acquisition, but all of these existing authorized sanctioned applications are now delivering AI enabled features through these
Hmm.
products, right? Just the other day, you see it now in the new versions of Chrome and Firefox, right? ChatGPT summarize this in Zoom and Teams,
Yeah.
summarize my video conversations for me. Just the other day, I opened up a PDF reader, Adobe Acrobat, something
Hmm.
as innocuous and ubiquitous as Adobe Acrobat, and it popped up. Hey, now you can summarize all of your PDFs by pressing this button, and it will read the PDFs that are open, send it to a Gen AI data sub processor, and then return a summary to you, right?
Hmm.
So I have to think about how do we have effective governance, security, and privacy controls so that we can reap the rewards of these technologies and leverage them for additional benefit to the organization, but doing it in a way that is reasonably secure, private, and responsible for us and our customers.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, Alfredo, you've been very candid about even taking on some of the hard questions, because if it's always about solutions and everything going great,
Mm,
then nobody would need security services, right? But it's not really so. A lot of chief information security officer listening to this will be like, hey, you just scared me. There's so many threat vectors now. And
mhm.
you guys compounded it in your 20-minute discussion on and on and on, right? So that means an incident may and will happen,
Oh,
right?
of course.
So, what's the hardest lesson that you have learned from a SaaS security incident, and how did it change your approach towards doing this right?
Yeah, the human relationship angle. In many different ways, technology is the simple challenge. It's the simple opportunity, right? We can develop technology, we can procure technology, we can innovate existing technology and evolve it and so forth, right? But people are not machines. We can't program a person. We can't submit a bug request to fix some kind of tension or deficiency in a person, right? The human element becomes, in some ways, the most predictable element and the most
Mhm.
unpredictable element. I take an approach that is almost like a counterinsurgency for security approach, right, where you have this generational strategic goal, right, of creating a culture and an environment that is conducive for security outcomes, for responsible, secure behavior in an environment. And that is creating the policy tier, the process tier, the governance tier, having a shared set of values that then create an organizational immune system to help reinforce positive behaviors and then also to be able to mitigate negative behaviors and such. That is much easier said than done. This is why I call it the counterinsurgency approach, right? It is a generational function. It is no straight line. There is regression all throughout, but as long as you consistently move in that direction, it will reap benefit for the organization. And then the second asset perspective to that is the tactical, organic, grassroots,
Mhm.
capabilities required to reinforce that at the human operating domain, which is, hey, are we providing our organization a shared security responsibility model, just like in the cloud service providers? Hey, as the leadership, part of the leadership for this team, this is what we expect from you in terms of reasonable, responsible, secure behavior in the conducting of your work as an employee here.
Yeah.
But then we provide you with these resources in order to enable those desired outcomes in the form of clear policy, communication, guardrails, automation, technology, education, so forth and so on, right? It has to be that shared security responsibility model between the employer and the employee, the
Mhm.
leadership team and the troops, to be able to come together to achieve those desired outcomes. Because at the end of the day, no matter where we sit in an organization, We want our organization to be secure, to be healthy, to thrive, and to be secure, right? No employee wants their organization to be hacked or to be breached or to be unprofitable or to be inefficient or so forth and so on. So it's a mutual relationship, the shared security responsibility model as it
Yeah.
pertains to our employees and employers. That's a huge one.
Yeah, security in most organization is notoriously known as risk averse, and
Yeah.
with good reason, right? So, how did you build credibility and trust early on in Obsidian's journey?
Yeah. The human relationships, being very candid, very clear, very, in some cases, vulnerable, right? Cybersecurity is an interesting thing, doing it in an enterprise. Everything that we do, just about everything that we do in security is by, with, and through others. Even there's no way security is in an interesting position in where it is or seeks to be horizontally integrated throughout an organization. In the modern digital enterprise, security risk exists in almost every single area of an organization, whether it's, human resources, marketing, product development, engineering, so forth and so on. You have cybersecurity risk. Cybersecurity risk for a broader risk leader is just another facet of risk that an organization has to factor. So we have to learn how to be able to establish these relationships with these constituencies that speak a different language than we do, that have different incentives and disincentives than we do, and then learn how to build these capacities within these organizations, how to establish reasonable guardrails that work for these organizations, and how to constantly have that dialogue, the candor, so that we can evolve and tune these processes to make sure that they're working for everybody. I call that a healthy organic security culture, right? Where it's these controls, these policies, these capabilities exist for the benefit of the organization. So let's make sure that they actually make sense for the organization and then tune. Because what maybe made sense for marketing or engineering or product a year ago, now because of the needs of the organization, changes in the market, external threat landscape, we need to revisit this. So it's a constant dialogue, to build that level of trust and credibility, right? And being very candid. And then bringing innovative things to the table, like factoring opportunity risk and positive risk as a risk leader. As we mentioned before, the current culture in cybersecurity is relatively risk averse. But if we look at from our perspective as technology leaders as well, we see that there's a lot of opportunities for positive risk exposure where we can more securely develop or implement technologies to enable our business to be more successful. When CISOs start bringing that perspective to the rest of the leadership team and to the rest of the units across the organization, now they see that we're actually trying to help make their lives better, make the business more profitable, become more efficient in our processes, reduce friction and so forth. That builds organic, genuine buy-in and trust.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very interesting. I think that also makes me think that so the role of CISO goes beyond just being the steward of security throughout the company. They're also part of the tech team, right? And
Mhm.
if you see in the way IT has changed in past has been that it used to be very business throw over the wall a project and IT delivers it and throws back over the wall, but that has completely changed in past for a lot of chief information officers, chief technology officers. They have become more aligned with business, sort of very hand
Sure.
in hand kind of role, right? So how do you ensure even security team is aligned with the business objectives and not just IT goals?
Yeah, yeah. That once again goes to those relationships and understanding the incentives, disincentives of those various organizations and the leaders within those organizations. At the end of the day, this is something that I think is a truism, for most security leaders working for profit organizations, is that if our organizations are not profitable, the largest existential risk to any for-profit organization is a loss of profitability and having the business implode, right? Because it can't make payroll, right? So at the end of the day, everything that we do across the organization has to be aligned to the mission of keeping the organization viable. Even for non-for-profit organizations that are, working in government or working in charity or working wherever, there is some function that allows that organization to thrive and to be able to attain what it considers success, even if it's not revenue, if it's mission accomplishment, if it's preventing an attack, if it's delivering critical services, for medical charities and so forth. There is some kind of outcome that that organization is dependent on to determine its success and viability. As security leaders, as risk leaders, we need to understand what that is and align our efforts to ensuring or supporting that outcome, right? And that, I think, when we identify that at a macro organizational level, and then within the various constituencies that exist throughout that organization, whatever they may be,
Mhm.
and we can align our services to support and assure those outcomes, you now become a valuable asset to the organization as opposed to a tax or some kind of imposed function on that organization.
Yeah, one of the best answers I heard so far. I've asked this question many times to a lot of C-suite executives on their role in aligning with business. And again, my mind goes into different stories and goes to where the state of the industry is at. This is an incredibly fast-growing industry. I mean, this global cybersecurity market is, I think I researched, going to be $298 billion by 2025. But at the same time, last I checked, there are over 3,500 global cybersecurity providers out there. 3,500, right? It's extremely opportunistic, but at the same time, it's extremely crowded with massive overlap. In
Mm-hmm.
all my discussions with successful cybersecurity companies, I've noticed kind of three recurring patterns that separate the standouts that I see doing really well, right? And I'll tell you something about Obsidian as well in there, right? The first is like the positioning. The best companies, cybersecurity companies, have picked a specific beachhead, you know, and that beachhead is where they truly excel, even while offering like multiple services like governance and all that. They have found their sweet spot.
Mm-hmm.
And for you guys, I found that there is a consistent resonance all through your message about SaaS security.
Mm-hmm.
It's not trying to solve every problem, but you stand for one thing: SaaS security, SaaS vulnerability, and things like that, which is number one thing needed that I'm seeing in my conversations. The second thing that I'm seeing is that they're also saying the right thing at the right channel. I don't know if you noticed that, but if, for example, for you guys, there are a lot of customers who don't know you yet, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you start sharing your capability and outcome in LinkedIn, which is your marketing channel, they will not look at it because they right now don't even know you. So they're not considering you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, they just want to know whether you understand their problem statements or not.
Mm-hmm.
Just like the way you explain the problem statements, right? Then at your website, they're kind of deciding, okay, I'm considering Obsidian. Is this the right partner for me or not? Now the capability and everything is important. In your sales presentation, it's about outcomes you delivered. So I'm seeing some of the companies get this sort of logic of what is my niche, where should I say it, where should I say what, so that I'm relevant to these chief information security officers, right?
Yes, yes,
Yeah, and last one that I've observed is like a game changer is that they understood that people buy from people. We spoke
yes.
about this earlier, right?
We sure
So
did.
now instead of their brand saying loudly that SaaS security, they identified leader like yourself or five, seven leaders from their company, and they become the voice of the industry
Yes.
so that they're winning the mind share. So I'm seeing these three things come out in so many of the discussions, but you just kind of, made me remember those things that I'm seeing, the patterns that are coming across, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. I think another data point that I was thinking when you were talking is that there's a massive talent shortage in cybersecurity. There are like over 3.5 unfilled positions globally. And so, how are you building and retaining a high performing security team in such a competitive talent market?
Yeah, this market, we're in an interesting place, right? In terms of it being currently a buyer's market as opposed to a seller's market from a human
Mm,
resources perspective. Their industry is growing by leaps and bounds. Organizations, consumption of technology services and exposure to associated cyber risk is only going to continue to grow exponentially. There is an existing base and a pipeline for the development of this talent to come and fit this role, but you see a position right now where even folks newly entering into the market with certifications or a degree, but that are still entry level, are really struggling to get their foot in the
mm,
door. I think that this is a highly complex topic. even for organizations that have established security programs looking to hire for entry level roles, there tends to be these unrealistic expectations, whether they come from HR organizations or recruiting firms in terms of the requirements that are needed, or even just in the risk of bringing in entry level people, even if they have a degree or credentials, in terms of bringing them up to speed quickly to deliver value to an organization as quickly as possible, de-risking it from the organization. So making poaching of existing people, experienced professionals, more prevalent, right? Experienced professionals with their networks moving from one opportunity to another organization. So it's an interesting place where the demand is clearly there. The market is evolving to grow the capacity of resources there to fill these roles, but people still are struggling, especially at the entry level, to get their foot in the door. This is the kind of job market now that many people just graduating from university, doing a career transition from one kind of career path to another in security are struggling with. This is where the power of the network and the power of real human relationships can really stand out. So right now, any organization with a positive reputation will put a rec out for a role and have hundreds of applications come in, right? These applications, some of them are, AI, developed. Some of these are just, spray and pray, and there's no tailoring to the organization and the role. They're just hoping that maybe they'll get an opportunity to come in there. I was just meeting with a young security professional that is in his senior year in the university right now that was asking me a very similar question. The recommendation that I gave him was, hey, build those real relationships. If you think a network is your follower count on LinkedIn, I tell you that your actual network of real relationships is only a subset of that. Invest in developing those genuine relationships because this community, as wide as it is, it's also small in some ways. And your reputation, those who you know, the opportunities that may present themselves, and word of mouth referrals and recommendations oftentimes will be much more valuable than just some random click on LinkedIn, apply here type of situation, right? And for those professionals looking to get their foot in the door for an organization, do your research. Know the organization, the leadership team, the market in which they operate in, and the challenges, opportunities, and risks, and then communicate to those hiring managers how you will onboard into that organization and how you plan on being successful in this role to add as much value to that organization as quickly as possible. When I'm interviewing people and they're coming to look to join Obsidian, if they know who we are, they know the market in which we play, they know the potential risks and opportunities, and they can come with a plan to onboard and to start delivering value as quickly as possible, that to me is very impressive. And it helps to cut through all of the noise that exists in this market, because it is a very, very challenging market right now.
Very challenging. I think it resonates so much with me because we recently took out a role and we released that role on Friday, I think similar time around 4 p.m., 4 Central. We launched that role because that's the time we get a little bit of time, more time to take out roles and everything. We got 1,400 submissions for a C-level role by Monday morning.
Yeah.
1,400.
Yep.
And if I were to take what you just said, and because this is so valuable to the younger generation that's coming out in the market, and we owe it to them. My
Mm-hmm.
thought process is to take what you said very, very literally. Anybody listening to this wanting to work in cybersecurity or anywhere in technology industry, don't think, and I can even think of a recipe while you were talking of what somebody should do. I think number one, they should identify the companies like yourself and many companies which are ideal employers for them. And that means that do it meaningfully and intentionally, right? Find out those companies. Second thing I would do is that even find out the leaders and connect with them, right?
Absolutely.
Third thing I would say is that use the power of LinkedIn and social media. If you post something that Obsidian or any security company is interested in or is the problem statement, they will automatically notice you,
Mm-hmm.
right? What are you doing in your final year? How is it relevant, right? It's a free ticket to attention from Alfredo. It's a free ticket to attention from anyone. Build your
Yes.
personal brand. Third thing I would do is that even before a role is out, I would direct message you with a video recording and I'll say, here are the three things I would do in my first month if I
Yes.
would. that shows that you cared to read what was on my website and what I'm wanting to do as a security company. And what is it? Because a lot of us are looking not just for talent, we're looking for attitude and willingness to learn, right? And if
Yes.
somebody can show, I think they can totally stand out and even get the roles which are probably not even open yet,
A
right?
hundred, 100%. And that is the true power of being proactive and doing your homework, doing your diligence, creating your plan, and then
Yeah.
executing on that plan. Those are the candidates that stand out to me when
Mhm.
they come to these interviews, prepared, when they've approached me even before they've applied for the role and told me about their intention and desire to join our organization, to be a part of the team and to help us become more effective in the market. And then when they come to the interviews well prepared with that plan, right? With that research, with that plan, that to me really stands out. And it helps those candidates stand out from all of the other hundreds of people that are vying for that role. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of that. Yep.
Yeah, hope this helps someone. But yeah, it's the most interesting. The last part of our section is the rapid fire round. Some rapid fire questions, and make this quick but real, authentic answers. Right? Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
So zero trust or defense in depth.
That's a hard one. I would say defense in depth as much as possible. So zero trust is a philosophy, and it's a great philosophy, but in practice, it is very, very difficult to do at all, let alone do well. Defense in depth can help mitigate if you have appropriate multi-layered controls to help support those defense in depth philosophy. I would go defense in depth.
Cool. Okay. What's one cybersecurity best practice you believe is actually counterproductive?
Security best practice that is okay, patch everything. Patch everything. I'm a huge believer at don't suck at patching, but here's
Mhm.
one thing that we've learned over the course of the last 20 years is you cannot patch everything all of the time. If you can prioritize the most important assets and the most important resources that contain the most sensitive data, and then marry that up to vulnerabilities in composition or exposure or whatever that are actually being exploited and targeted, and prioritize fixing those. It's the 80-20 rule, right? Where 20% of your effort will result in 80% of the outcome, right?
Awesome. Yeah. So, what's the one thing you wish chief information officers or CISOs would stop doing when it comes to SaaS security?
Stop doing when it comes. Okay, I wish that chief information security officers would realize that there is no shared security responsibility model in SaaS. When you consume a SaaS application, even if you have effective due diligence controls and contractual controls and so forth, realize that you as the customer are ultimately accountable for the security of the data and those resources and the workflows that they support. So realize there is no shared security responsibility model. You do not transfer accountability of risk when you start consuming SaaS. You are still responsible for securing those resources, the business critical workflows that they enable in the data that they contain.
Super. All right. What's one personal habit that has most improved your effectiveness as a security leader?
As a security leader, most improved my effectiveness, taking care of my health. Everything that we do in life is predicated on the foundation of our health. If we are not healthy, mind, body, and spirit, we cannot be effective in anything else that we do in our lives. Family, business, anything is all predicated on our health. If you take care of your health, it will take care of you. It will sustain you. It will make you more resilient. Sustainable. It will make you more available. It'll make you available, sustainable, and resilient, just like our cloud services. Take care of your health.
Yeah, Alfredo, you convinced me. I had two things in mind at this Friday evening, a beer first or a run. I think I'm going to take a run.
And then reward yourself with a cold beer when you come back.
Very good. Very good. All right. Last one. How do you measure the effectiveness of your SaaS security program in business terms, not just technical terms?
Yeah, so in business terms, the effectiveness of your SaaS security programs is really measured in the confidentiality, the integrity, and the availability of those applications. Your organization has procured those resources in order to deliver some sort of value and outcome for the organization. You and your security programs, by being able to evolve your security controls to assure those resources, provide that the value that they seek to realize from those applications is delivered in a consistent and reliable and repeatable manner. right, and in a secure and responsible manner for your organizations. And in the event when the attack will inevitably come, when the breach will inevitably happen, that you can detect to it, respond to it, and recover from it as quickly as possible with minimal disruption. That is the value. That is the outcome that we seek.
Yep, yep, very cool. All right, well, thank you, Alfredo, for these positive and powerful insights on securing SaaS environments and building resilient security teams. Especially your journey from Marine Corps infantry to cybersecurity leadership demonstrated the value of sort of diverse backgrounds in our industry. So, thank you for being on our show today.
Well, thank you so much, Chirag. Thank you so much, everybody. Appreciate you.
Yeah, for our listeners who want to learn more about Obsidian Security or connect with Alfredo, all links are in the show notes. Stay tuned for more conversations with leaders reshaping technology and business on CXO Spotlight, powered by Flywheelr.
To catch more such interesting conversations, subscribe to our channel on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Music.